Welcome to the new episode of Being Politically Correct. In the last episode of Politically Correct, we had discussed what is meant by being politically correct in this dynamic, fast-moving modern world. Today, we shall discuss with respect to democratic socialism and its political correctness with our guest, Dr. D.K Giri. In today's episode, we shall discuss what is meant by democratic socialism and its 7 pillars as elaborated by Dr. Giri in the earlier episode of Being Politically Correct. We have with us our guest, Dr. Giri, who shall enlighten us with the 7 pillars of democratic socialism. In today's episode, we shall learn about the first pillar of democratic socialism, which is liberty. Welcome to our show, sir. Can you elaborate to our audience what is meant by democratic socialism?
Democratic socialism, like Marxism, liberalism, capitalism, conservatism, is a political ideology. This is, a lot of people would say, a medieval house between communism and capitalism. But that is partly correct. Social democracy or democratic socialism, which are now interchangeably used, evolved independently as a political philosophy. In fact, it predates Marxism, goes back to the experiment of Robert Owen in the New Lanark in his textile industry, where he gave the industry to the workers for their own management. So that, I think, was the seed of socialism, which started much before Karl Marx came into the scene. So that is the historicity of the ideology. But your question, what democratic socialism means, is that it is socialism through democratic means. Communism is through revolution, sudden change of economic and political system when you overthrow a capitalist society. Marked stages of growth of a society, the highest form is capitalism, and then from capitalism it is imperialism. But if you destroy capitalism, you are supposed to bring socialism. So that is through a revolution. Social democrats would say that we could bring socialism through democratic means in a gradual and evolutionary process. So that's how it is different from communism, and it different from other forms of politics. Mainly liberalism, which gives liberty, gives primacy to the individuals, but does not give equality or solidarity. So as you said in your introductory remarks, that social democracy is based on 7 principles. If you recognize these 7 principles, you can perhaps identify or build social democracy in a particular country. We can go through each of the principles, but essentially social democracy is a political system, an economic arrangement where people enjoy freedom, equality, social justice, and solidarity. To make it universal, these principles originated in the West, going back to French Revolution really, and these are largely Western concepts, but socialism has drawn later on from the Eastern culture and society as well, where concepts like identity, diversity also come into public domain and come into play. So to make social democracy not Eurocentric but universal, we have added principles like identity, pluralism, which accommodates diversity, and dignity, given the inequalities and indignities in society, we have also introduced dignity into the vocabulary and the framework of social democracy. So these 7 principles constitute the social democratic framework. Of course, from these principles, policies in each context and country would follow.
Right, sir. Like our Indian preamble and the constitution as well promises to its citizen right to life and liberty, and so does various international conventions as well. What, according to you, and how will you define liberty as in a definite definition?
Right. Liberty is drawn from a Latin word called liber, which means liberation. That means you are liberated. You are not in bondage. You are not in captivity. There were slaves earlier. They had no freedom. They were in captivity actually. So when you are liberated from such situations, such bondage, then you are supposed to be free. People also talk about freedom from ignorance, freedom from darkness. You see, these are metaphoric use, but freedom is a concept which can be defined in terms of the certain rights of people when they can exercise such rights. For example, your right to speak, which is called now freedom of speech. So if you exercise those rights enshrined in any constitution, you are supposed to be enjoying freedom. So in one sense, accessing rights is freedom. In other sense, you are free when you are able to make choice, your own choices, and to lead your life as you wish, to grow into your full potential. That is when you are supposed to be free. So freedom is then defined by a person's environment, which should be enabling, and ability, which comes from within, because the person is free, and the ability to define oneself and to choose a path for oneself. That is when you have freedom.
Right, sir. Since we can understand through your explanations how important freedom and liberty is to an individual's existence in the modern world or in any world, especially after all the years of struggle and evolution, how and why is liberty such an important factor and a pillar of democratic socialism?
Okay, the essence again of democratic socialism is really the freedom and equality, and that is how democracy is built. And we say that socialism without democracy could lead to fascism. So democracy is critical to ensuring a socialist society. Now the question is how critical freedom is to one's life. You see, it is critical to a person's existence, his or her physical existence, spiritual existence, and to his life and options for livelihoods. The famous Nobel laureate Amartya Sen used to say development is freedom. If you are not developed, you are not free. For instance, a person who is not educated, healthy, skilled or informed, that person cannot go places, because how will it move? So in order to be free, you need to be developed. So development is a precondition for enjoying freedom. That's one aspect. But I see freedom in two senses, conceptually. One is a structural freedom, some people call it negative liberty. Other would be a functional freedom, which people call it positive liberty. The difference is When you have a so-called negative liberty or structural freedom, you have been given certain rights in the constitution. You have also provisions for your freedom. Freedom of speech, the 6 freedoms that is given in Indian constitution. Freedom of speech, assembly, organizing, blah blah. But if you are not able to exercise those rights, then you cannot enjoy the 6 freedoms as well. You see, for instance, you are free to pursue a profession. That is also one of the 6 freedoms of your choice. But how can you pursue a profession if you are not skilled? If you do not have an enabling condition, right education, adequate health care, sufficient means of subsistence. If you do not have this, what is in vernacular language in India called roti kapla or makan, which is the basics for a decent existence. If you do not have them, then you will not be able to enjoy your freedom. So you need an enabling environment that could facilitate your structural freedoms.
True, sir. Structural freedom can only be of use if the operational freedom is in its full blow.
Yeah.
And operational freedom can only be possible when the citizens or the people enjoying them understand their own liberty as well as the importance of freedom for others along with them. What do you think are the importance and the basic principles of liberty that every citizen or human being must understand in order to be able to carry forward operational freedom in a better manner in the modern world?
You see, the costs of unfreedom, which is opposite of freedom, have to be calculated. If you are liberated in a liberated atmosphere or framework, you are more productive. But if somebody is watching you out, somebody is holding you back, and there are lots of restrictions, then you cannot be productive, because you will always be watching at your back to see if you are doing something wrong, or some big daddy is watching you. So, a liberated atmosphere where you are free from fear, anxiety, intimidation, even a psychosis, mentally being free. Those conditions have to be met to make a person productive and content, happy. That is also important, because feeling good, what is called feel-good factor, is important for enhancing or maintaining your productive capacities. So that is how you ensure a particular society or country ensures freedom for its people. You can say you have freedom from hunger, fair enough, it is given as a right, or you have a right to food, you see. But supposing food is not accessible or not available, we say when we provide a facility to a person, whether it is food or transport or healthcare, we use a formula called 3A, which means it should be available. That is the first thing. It should be affordable. It is available, but you can afford it. And it should be accessible. You see, then only you can enjoy those facilities provided to you. For instance, in our traditional societies, where there were so-called untouchables, they were not allowed to go to a well which is used by the upper caste. So the water is available, it is affordable, it is free, because it is a nature's gift, or it's a natural asset and a collective asset. But that untouchable is not allowed to go to that well, so it is not accessible for that person, you see. And when it is accessible, it is not affordable. For instance, the private school system, which is a quality school system. It is there, it is accessible, you can go, and it is available, but you cannot afford it. Fees are very high, fees are frightening. So people with less income don't go there. So they are deprived of quality education. So these three A's, as I said, if they are equally implementable, then also you have the freedom, and freedom becomes meaningful. So freedom from hunger is not enough. In order to meet hunger, you should have food which is based on 3A.
Right, sir. In the new India, in the India today, we can see that freedom and liberty in its essence has been degrading day by day. India fell 4 points in the International Freedom Index, and according to international reports, we have gone from free to a partly free country. In such situation where the government directly or indirectly has been cracking down upon civil liberties, organizations, intimidating its academicians, journalists, students, the future of the country has been discouraging liberty of thought, liberty of speech, liberty in all its senses. In fact, in such dire conditions, how should a normal citizen of the country who is unaware even now of what liberty should mean to its fellow brothers and sisters, and how they can ensure liberty not just for themselves but also for the people living around them, beside them, with them?
Yes, this is a bit of an unpleasant and unfortunate trend that we see in the recent past, particularly since 2014, when a particular political party came into power. The three evaluations that you are referring to, one is the VDEM from Sweden, which called India an electoral autocracy, and the Freedom House in the United States, which said India is partly free, and the Democracy Index of the Economic Intelligence Unit of The Economist also brought India down in the list of democratic countries. They are autonomous organizations, and if they are saying so, it's a matter of concern. We cannot dismiss it as a part of international conspiracy, really. These institutes are fairly credible and autonomous, and have been doing rigorous research for years. I think the reason for such a picture of India portrayed abroad or seen from outside and even from inside is government, the present government being defensive. They are wanting to promote a kind of nationalism where everybody feels proud and everyone speaks for the country, however they define it. How do you speak for a country in unison in a democracy? There will be difference of opinion, but they don't want to hear a word of criticism or protest. We are on a forward march, first forward march to being a big power, so we should not really tear away into India's nationalism and India's march to big power status. So they think that this democratic mudslinging or aspersions on the government would reduce that prospect and dilute the image of the country. On the contrary, the government's repressive actions to stifle the dissent and to suppress protest is diluting our image as a democracy. So it is worrying that press is bullied and twisted, and civil society is stifled. The dissent is countered with strong arm tactics. So all these things are indications of democracy flailing. So I would urge the government and the political leadership that democracy should be allowed to have its full play, and it is good for the country when people are able to express their displeasure or a disagreement. That is good for a democracy, and that is the beauty of democracy. Actually, you have critics which help you do the course correction, or help you feel that what you are doing is really good. So in any way, the criticism is good, and we should welcome critics, not suppress them. And suppression of freedom will be bad for the health of the society and the polity. So freedom, when it is curbed, it expresses itself in a more violent and nastier manner. So if you allow, it is like a pressure cooker, some people call it pressure cooker politics. So if you allow the pressure to pass, that bulb is there, then gradually it comes to a standstill position. But if the pressure is not let out, then the cooker can burst. You see, so that is that is a simple analogy to tell our rulers and law enforcement agencies that allow the dissent to be expressed, of course within the constitutional framework. If it does not hurt anyone else, then such expressions should be welcome, and save the country from eventual explosion. You see, that is a caution that our politicians must take, and it is quite worrying that democracy is being questioned. India is the biggest democracy, and that has been our asset, as well as in marketing terms, has been our USP in the international politics. So if we give that away, then we would be less powerful vis-a-vis countries like China and North Korea, Turkey, and other despotic regimes, even Russia, and others. So democracy, pluralism, diversity are our natural assets and civilizational glory. So we should preserve them and use them to our advantage. And freedom is certainly the basis of all of it.
True, sir. We can very well understand how important freedom and liberty is to a person's existence. Without freedom, possibly development is not possible, and without development, liberty is cannot be foreseen either. So, with looking at the present situation in the country, and in fact even the world, and the crackdown on freedom of all kinds all around, what we can understand is how can the people, since democracies are of the people, by the people, for the people, how can the public claim its liberty and freedom and democracy once again? Through what measures? What should be the steps taken by the public or the citizens of the respectful countries, so that they can reclaim what freedom and liberty means to be able to live a decent life in the world.
Yeah. The famous advice, which is a popular quotation on democracy or freedom, is that the eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, as you know. So you have to be vigilant all the time to guard your freedoms, to guard your rights. So when your rights are taken away, when the institutions are tweaked or twisted, then you have to protest. So protest is the best form of defending your liberty. Yeah. One, remaining vigilant. Second, remaining engaged in the political process. Third is wherever your liberty is threatened, protest. If you leave it to one or two individuals to fight for themselves, not good enough. See, the civil society as a whole collectively should stand up for freedom, for securing your rights. The other advice which was given to us, which is similar to the quotation that I just said, was by Jayaprakash Narayan. You would not perhaps remember, you would not be born then, I'm sure. Jayaprakash Narayan led a very valiant struggle against the emergency that was imposed in 1975. And then, civil liberties, political rights were all suspended. You were not free. More than a certain number of people cannot gather, so freedom of assembly is gone. Press were all banned, so freedom of speech and expression is gone. Elections were banned, so freedom for political activity, freedom of choice was taken away. So it was a dark phase in our political life. But Jayaprakash Narayan rose in revolt against it. The students and youths were agitating. He led that movement and finally managed and succeeded with support of several political parties in restoring the freedom and democracy in our country. While he was leading that movement, he did say in one of his essays that the right time to save the house is when somebody chips away a part of your roof. Then you know that this will continue. That is the time to save the house, not when the entire house is tottering on one slender pillar. So, there is another saying, a stitch in time saves nine. So, an action or a reaction at an appropriate time will help you save your freedom. So, if you let it pass, if you let one act of apolitical, anti-democratic nature, that will sink you deep into the cesspool of authoritarianism, which is opposite of democracy. You see, many countries, if you let them have their way, the leaders, they become authoritarian. You see, Lord Acton in British Parliament made a famous statement. He said that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Meaning people, when they get power, and if the power is untrammeled, without any opposition, then they try to accumulate power and try to become a despot, an authoritarian. So it is happening in China, it's happening in Soviet Union, and North Korea, Turkey, many other places. And that tendency has to be curbed, and people have to be eternally, consistently vigilant about their rights and about their freedoms. So that is how you save your freedom and guard your rights.
Truly inspiring and enlightening concepts you've laid for us here in this episode, sir. Like it said, nobody is free until everybody is free. Let us understand this concept, you and me together. And I hope that our audience could understand in a better manner what liberty means in this world, and especially in context to democratic socialism and how development can ensure both liberty and further development for everybody in the living world. Thank you for watching our episode. Keep connected to the Politically Correct.